Here's Dewey McCormick to introduce the team.
Hello again, everyone, as I open the question box and call in the three fundies to see how they fare with what you provided for them, listeners. Tonight's programme will have a very special and a sad significance because that veteran test-the-teamer, Eric Rosenthal, is bowing out after many years at the quiz microphone. And as I call him in for the last time, I think it's we who should bow to you, Eric.
That's very nice of you.
How many years has it been?
35.
35 as a quizman.
Now, I tell you, the reason I can remember the 35 is because it was when the royal family was visiting South Africa in 1947, and whenever that white train of theirs used to stop on Sunday night at some little unspeakable dorp, they used to turn on
the original cross-country quiz. I remember. Program. Eric, it's been a terrific record. I wish I could only just say that I first listened to you in short trousers, but I was grown up. But calling in Grant Loudon in Durban.
Good evening, all.
And Anthony Vetri in Cape Town.
Good evening, listeners.
Now, from Durban, Grant, you'll have to get the black book out, I think, for Mr. F.H. Herbst, right from private bag 54333, because I think it could be a score. The new issue of 10 postcards are commonly regarded as depicting 10 different fruits, but in fact, there are only 9. How is that? That's a good question, Mr. Herbst, and I'm prepared to let the team and the listeners dwell on this and come back to it in due course because it's quite a difficult one, and I wonder whether the listeners might get hold of the answer before the team does. Let's just let it brew. The new issue of 10 postcards, commonly regarded as depicting 10 different fruits, but in fact, there are only 9. How does that come about? So
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Has this got something to do with the distinction between the nomenclature in English and in Afrikaans?
No, it hasn't actually, no.
It's not one of these elf.
No, it's not a fishy question, this one. Not at all, not at all. We'll come back to it. And we go to one from Emrys Egan of Panorama Road, Panorama, Paro. What is the longest man-made object in the world? Longest man-made object in the world. I think we can argue about this one. Grant, I'll start with you.
Well, it's supposed to be traditionally the Great Wall of China.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's supposed to be the only man-made object that you can see from outer space.
Well, it's the only thing that you can see from the moon.
That's right. That's because of its bulk. But what is the longest man-made object in the world?
In other words, you're not accepting Great Wall.
No, I'm not. I'm giving you only one more chance. Grant, back to you.
It's probably an underwater cable.
I think it's also one of these, a thing like the Trans-Siberian Railway or the Union Pacific Railway in America.
You see, Grant has got something there, and Eric has got something. Our listener, Emrys, gives the Trans-Siberian oil pipeline and not the Great Wall of China. But then, of course, an underwater cable,
Probably much longer.
Stretches from Cape Town, via Ascension up to the UK or Portugal, whatever it may be, is a very long one, but we don't happen to be able to see it. That's why I thought we might argue about this, Emrys.
Well, the Atlantic cable all stretches from the United States to Britain.
There's an even longer one across the Pacific, of course.
Of course, there's a Trans-Pacific as well. Yeah.
So I think it's very much an open question, that one. What about that rabbit fence in Australia? That's a very long one, isn't it?
Well, it's comparatively short compared with cables.
Yes, that's true enough. All right, we go on to a question from A. Hoots of Galloway Road, King Williamstown. What is the difference between a man of Kent and a Kentish man? Anthony.
Well, it depends which side of the Medway they are born. The Medway is the acid test here.
That's the river.
Yes, the River Medway. If they're born on the left-hand side of the Medway, then they are men of Kent. And if they're born on the right-hand side, they are Kentish men.
Now, which is the east and which is the right? Left or right? Which is the east and which is the west?
Well, if they're born on the east side...
They are?
They are men of Kent.
Oh, yes, I thought you might trip on that one and fall flat into the Medway. No, you're quite right. And Kentish men live on the west of the Medway. The origin, according to our listener, is stated to have been that there were two tribes in the Anglo-Saxon times, one having its capital at Canterbury and the other at Rochester. Is that so?
That is correct.
That's the explanation. From Glenstanshire, Mr. Dave Soons, a 24-year-old, at the time Canadian pilot by the name of Roy Brown, has a unique claim to fame that is a significant fact of air history yet is largely forgotten these days. What was it? It's been forgotten by the gentleman sitting here in front of the Quizmaster's microphone. Grant, what do you suggest?
Was this the fellow who flew with Alcock and Brown?
No. This is another one. This is a Canadian.
A Canadian Roy Brown.
You give no reference, Mr. Dave Soons, our listener.
Does he give a date? Because given baldly like that, given his age, with no date, you know, it's very difficult to pinpoint even if we do know it.
You see, there's no reference quoted here, and I wonder whether there might be argument about this one. I'm going to give you the answer and see what you think about it. He says Brown was the one who shot down Baron Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, on the 21st of April 1918 over the Somme Valley.
Well, I don't know. I don't think he did. Did he shoot down Richthofen?
I don't know. It doesn't ring a bell with me, but that's not to say it isn't correct.
I remember reading, I think, 2 separate accounts of von Richthofen's being shot down, but the name Brown doesn't come to mind.
Yes, I've read accounts of it too, and Brown certainly doesn't come to mind. Mr. Dave Soons, we don't want to cast any nasturtiums around here, but I wonder, could you quote your reference? Because, after all, published references are not always entirely factual, are they? We've had such experience in Test the Team already. But we'd like to know where you got it from, so that perhaps, without being too arrogant about it, we can assess whether that reference is really substantiable. Could you do that? And we'll pen that £5 award meanwhile.
Shall I look after it for you, Joe?
Seems a bit ungenerous, but I think, you know, we must, we tend to try tactfully to insist on references so that we don't go too far astray. Thank you very much for the question. From Mr. Gordon A. Wood of Garrick Street, Pietermaritzburg, what was job number 534? What was job number 534, Eric?
That was the name given to the building of the Queen Mary, the liner, the ship.
That's right. She was still being built. She was
before she had a name.
That's right. Job 534.
This was John Brown Shipyard on Cloudside.
That's right.
There we are.
Matter of fact, later on, I remember walking underneath the second Queen Mary at Clydebank.
Really?
I walked underneath her.
Which second Queen Mary was this? Oh, you mean the sister ship in Queen Elizabeth?
Queen Elizabeth.
Yes.
Queen Elizabeth. Really? When she was building? Right, Mr. Jack F. Rees of Boaters Hill. Who first made the statement, cleanliness is next to godliness? Cleanliness is next to godliness. Anthony.
Well, this is the famous John Wesley in one of his sermons. I think it's Sermon 93.
Sermon 93, was it?
Yes.
Ah.
Well, what answer have you got there?
Yes, I got John Wesley, and Mr. Rees goes on to say, when he founded Kingswood School, which I attended, he made the statement, cleanliness is next to godliness. Therefore, every boy shall wash his neck on Tuesday nights and his feet every other Saturday, whether they need it or not. Hence, Mr. Rees adds, hence the term odour of sanctity. A schoolmaster I had many years ago used to insist that that quotation was attributable to Lord Lever. Class never could work out exactly why.
Well, it was the first principle of Lord Lever, wasn't it?
Yes, it should be, of course. Mr. V.J. Allen of Richmond Park, Port Elizabeth. What is a Jacobus when it's not a name? A Jacobus would be what, Anthony?
Yeah, well, it was a gold coin. A gold coin at the time of James I of England, you see.
That's right.
James I. Well, Jacobus, of course, is the Latinized form of James.
Of James, indeed. Question from Mr. R.G. Lighthowler of Lamb Road, Orkney in the Transvaal. What was the ancient name for the Dardanelles, and what is the origin of the name? Eric?
The Hellespont.
Hellespont. And who swam it?
Well, it's a famous incident in classical antiquity with the two lovers. And the young man swam across to see his girlfriend on the other side.
That's right. Anthony?
The young man's name was Leander, and his girlfriend was
Hero and
yes.
Leander.
Hero
Yes.
and Leander. Didn't Byron subsequently swim
Yes,
it?
Byron swam the Hellespont, and so did Rupert Brooke, as a matter of fact.
And yes, and then Byron had a club foot, which is more...
Lady Caroline Lamb didn't swim at the same time, did she? There's a classic story, of course, wasn't there? Now we've got one that I think might ring a buzzer with the team. It comes from Mrs. E.M. Walker of Villanelle Street, Bloemfontein. Please ask your team, in brackets, I think we had better keep so-and-so, and she names him out of this, close brackets.
Give us the name so the person in question will remain silent.
What would one call Sozibeli today? S-O-Z-I-B-E-L-I. What would one call Sozibeli today? That's obviously an earlier name.
Sozibeli.
Yes.
There was no need to keep anybody out of it because we don't know from the sound.
I've got a wonderful reference here.
Sozibeli.
Someone's encyclopedia.
It might be the name of a person, it might be a place name.
Ah, well, now, can the team jump in and decide, A, whether it's a person or B, a place name?
I think it's a person.
You think it's a person?
I think it's a place name, but I can't identify it.
You think it's a place name?
Yes.
All
Can't
right.
identify it.
You can't identify it? Is this going to be a score?
It is, I think.
It's a score to Mrs. E.M. Walker of Villanelle Street, Bloemfontein. And she said, I think we'd better keep Eric Rosenthal out of this. Eric, you see? So there we are. So the award will be on the way to you, Mrs. Walker. Congratulations.
What's the answer?
Oh, of course, it's a good question, isn't it? Sozibeli would be called Harare, because it's an earlier name for Salisbury.
Really?
Yes, apparently. Sozibeli is the name the black people gave to Salisbury, which is Harare today.
Funny, I always thought that Harare was the original name which has been reinstituted.
So did I, if you really had twisted my arm. But I can quote you a very good reference, Anthony. Eric Rosenthal's Encyclopedia of Southern Africa, or South Africa, page 55.
Now, who can argue with that?
Who can argue with that? Eric, did you hear that? Eh?
Oh, well.
Now from Mrs. F. Rubin of Albany Road, Seapoint. On the cinema screen, one hears the voice of Clarence Nash, but one never sees him. What's all that about? The voice of Clarence Nash. Anthony?
I'm wondering if he's the roar of the MGM lion.
One hears the voice of Clarence Nash, but one never sees him. What's that all about?
I think he's one of the Disney characters.
Maybe he's the voice of Woody Woodpecker or something like that.
Would you like to go nap for one or other as a final answer?
I think he's Donald Duck.
What
Donald
makes
Duck.
you think that?
Well, I don't know. I read an article some many years ago about the man behind the Donald Duck, and I think his name was Nash.
Really? And you're absolutely right.
Am I?
He's the voice of Donald Duck.
Marvellous.
Now, that's inspirational, Grant.
Yes.
That really was brought out of the recesses of the memory somewhere. But, of course, it's strictly speaking wrong. It should be Donald Drake, shouldn't he?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Well, anyway, that's the halfway mark when we sit back for a few moments and let others do the talking. We start the second part of Test the Team for tonight with a question here from Mrs. A.L. Besuidenhout of Peter Maritzburg. Methuselah was reputed to be the oldest man known, yet he died before his father. How come? How come? How did that happen, Anthony?
Well, his father was Enoch.
Enoch?
Yeah. Now, the point was that Enoch walked with God and was not, because God took him. That's what we are told in Genesis.
That's right.
In other
Genesis.
words, am I right? In other words, he was translated at the age of 365. So translation actually means going straight to heaven.
That's right. Now from Mrs. G.P. Pitcher of Winkle-Sprout, Natal. Are we still right with Winkle-Sprout, Grant? Or have
Well,
we
I
advanced?
think so. Well, no, I think it's still all right. Winkle or Winkle-Sprout will do.
But I don't want to be ahead of the times, you know, particularly with those Natalites. You know what it is?
Yeah, well, you know, they say Winkle is a bit shop soiled down there, so you mustn't use it.
Mrs. Pitcher's question is, what three states in the world share a unique distinction in being the only states to be totally contained within another state?
It's
That's a good
surrounded by
question.
another state.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Start with you, Eric.
Well, the Vatican is one of them.
Vatican is one.
And San Marino, I think.
San
is another
Marino
one.
is another one. Come on, make it a full house, Eric.
And then I think Andorra is another one.
No.
No. What would you say, Grant?
Lesotho.
Lesotho is the third one. You've got it there. Lesotho, the Vatican State, and the Republic of
Well, you
San
could say
Marino.
Monaco, too, because
Monaco, yes.
Monaco, because
Monaco
it
is
is,
a
in fact,
coastline.
Yes, but
contained
Monaco's on the-
completely
Monaco's
within
on the
France.
But
On
it
the
has a
coast.
sea coast, you see.
Has a coast.
Yes, I suppose so.
From, oh yes, let's go back now. The bad news from Mr. F.H. Herbst of Durban, the new issue of 10 postcards. Why is it stated here in the question that there are only 9 fruits depicted, whereas there are 10 postcards?
Clearly, one fruit appears twice, perhaps in 2 separate versions of the fruit. Is that it?
No.
Unfortunately, I've got to bow out here because I've not seen
Right.
these postcards at all.
Eric, have you got a chance of this one?
No.
Or not? I don't think anybody's got it, and so it's a score to you, Mr. F.H. Herbst of Durban. One of the so-called fruits depicted is the pineapple. And it's not a fruit.
No, it's a vegetable.
It's a berry, isn't it? I
Berry,
believe
yes,
it's a
it is.
berry,
It
isn't
is
it?
a berry, mm.
So it's strictly speaking, I mean, you know, this is a very sort of academic question, but it's strictly right, and it's a jolly good score to you, Mr. Herbst, and we'll be sending along that 5 rands. How many postcards does that buy at 8 cents a throw?
A lot of pineapples.
A lot of pineapples, yes. So we'll get a few questions from you, Mr. Herbst, as a result of that win. Jolly nice work. From Clifford Raju of Port Shepstone, I'd like to ask the team, what is the name given to a person who walks on ropes? What is a person who walks on ropes, Anthony?
It's a funambulist.
Funambulist. He's not a man who collects matchboxes or anything like that. I get them terribly mixed up these days after so many years of hearing him on the programme. From Harry Bragg of Warmer, Buffelsfontein Centre for Senior Citizens, it's well known that Lady Godiva rode naked through the streets of Coventry. Does the team know why? Or have we forgotten that charming legend? Have we forgotten it, Grant?
No, we haven't forgotten it. It arose from the famous statement that you don't cast a clout before May be out, which she hadn't heard at that stage. See?
Oh, I see.
The story, to be serious, if one can be serious about Lady Godiva, is that she was trying to persuade a brute of a husband to behave himself.
Yes.
He was King of Mercia.
Yes, he was King of Mercia. Anthony?
It was also a protest against excessive taxation, wasn't it?
Yes. Eric, would you have agreed with that one?
Well, it's a thing I do. I think they want to try it against income tax.
That's right. Oh, yes. Well,
Well,
you mean,
it's reduced me to nakedness anyway. I don't have to ride.
you mean that streaking at Newlands on one occasion was protesting against income tax?
That's what they tell me.
Well, those chaps shouldn't be censured, should they? Should be just dressed up. Eh? Next, from Alison Roberts of Queen Mary Avenue, Durban. The quagga is an extinct South African animal, but do the members of the team know just where and when the last quagga died? I'd accept where, not necessarily when. Eric?
I have a feeling the last quagga died in the Amsterdam Zoo in the late Victorian times.
Your feeling is absolutely right. Would you care to be more specific as to time, Anthony?
1872.
1883 I've got here, but I didn't pin them down, Alison. I just wanted to know where it died, in a cage in the Amsterdam Zoo. Mrs. Eleanor M. Cameron of Walter Road, Charlotte, Port Elizabeth, has a very curious question. She says, I came across this quotation in Peter Usanov's autobiography and thought it rather amusing. I wonder if your wise men know who's responsible for it. And the quotation is, remember you are an Englishman and consequently have won first prize in the lottery of life. Who's alleged to have said that? I mean, could he really barefacedly have said that, Anthony?
I'm pretty sure he did. He said it in one of his letters to a young man.
Yes?
Somebody that we know very, very well in South Africa, isn't it? It's none other than Cecil John Rhodes.
You believe this, do you?
No, I'm pretty sure it's correct.
Well, it's very interesting because Mrs. Cameron adds from Peter Usanov's autobiography, Cecil Rhodes once gave this advice to a nervous young officer about to police a bit of the empire. So this is why Cecil Rhodes is regarded with a certain degree of opprobrium, is that right?
It's not the only reason.
Next, from Miss M. Garner of Port Elizabeth, box number 506. What is the longest river in Scotland? Longest river in Scotland. Is there argument about that one, Grant?
I think there probably is. I would have said the Tweed, but some people might say the Clyde.
What would you say, Anthony?
I was going to say the Tay.
Well, this is the answer I've got
It
here,
is
the Tay.
yes, yes.
Yes, indeed it is. The Tay is 120 miles through the Grampian Mountains.
Yes.
There we are. And we wind up with a rather charming reaction to the programme from Mrs. Pam Seiler of Buckingham Avenue, Craighall Park. I'm not going to set it as a question, Mrs. Seiler, But she asks, who could be described as a man of steel and scourge of test the team? And the answer she gives is, guess what? A panel beater. Top of the class, Mrs. Pam Seiler. Nice work, and it brings us up to a nice, amused finish. And I thank you, as always, listeners, for the questions. And at this early stage of the year, I may say, I always find the question box is a bit low, so thinking caps on, please. Let's have the benefit of your wits and ingenuity. The address for questions, as always, is Test the Team, SABC, P.O. Box 2551, Cape Town, 8000. And now, just before we sign off, a word from the marketplace.
Mos lekker die, gekoop met my skyfie.
Kom nou naar die NBS en kry jou skyfie.
NBS bied nou lenings vir eerstemal huiskopers. Geen gesukkel, geen vertragings nie. As u nog nooit 'n huis of 'n woonstel besit het nie, is dit nou u kans. NBS bied lenings vir eerstemal huiskopers. Volle besonderhede by u naaste Natal Bouvereniging tak of agent.
Kom nou naar die NBS en kry jou skyfie.
Denver, Colorado, downside of the Rocky Mountain snowline, where trails head west to the big country, the reward of the great outdoors, where a man gets that feeling of wide open spaces. Your kind of life? Then Paul Revere is your kind of cigarette, rich in flavor, big on taste. Paul Revere, the pride of tobaccos.
Signing off now, and with much regret on our part, for the last time from Eric Rosenthal. Eric, you've been an absolute tower of strength in quizzes for so many years, and I don't have to say it, everybody knows you and your terrific record, but I don't think everybody knows that you distinguished yourself as a South African contestant in international quizzes, raising our quiz banner high throughout the world. So let me sum it up by saying, and I think I can say it on behalf of our listeners as well as the team, congratulations on a wonderful record.
Well, thanks very much.
Eric, you mustn't forget us. Remember that question pot needs topping up from time to time, and you've written so much over so many years. You must have thousands of questions. Team, stand by. Eric's going to be on the warpath.
We'll have to watch him.
Well, no, this question of standing by, I mean, I started with all this doing the sort of thing at school. We had general knowledge papers sometimes in Johannesburg. I don't know if you remember PTPS, Parktown Preparatory School.
And Eric, have you enjoyed your quiz life all these years?
I certainly have. In fact, I'm still enjoying it, and I think the real hero of the occasion is yourself, who has been able to keep up the standard and to know how to handle the...
Oh, Eric, you're too kind. I'm just the lucky conductor of the orchestra, but it's been a great privilege for me to have worked with you for so many years, and it predates, actually, this particular program, Test the Team. I remember we worked together so many years ago in Cape Town. But that's it for now. Eric, don't forget us, and we're going to sign off now from Grant Loudon in Durban.
Wonderful to have worked with you, Eric, and keep well.
Anthony Vetri in Cape Town.
Yes, I think I shall miss Eric most of all because he's been sitting opposite me these many years, and now I have a blank.
Indeed, he has.
Good night, listeners, and good luck, Eric.
Both of you.
Until next Sunday, when I'll introduce the new member of the panel, Robert Blythe in Johannesburg. Goodbye.
Dewar McCormack and our trio of experts will be back next Sunday evening at 8:15, inviting you again to Test the Team.